Hi, friends. This episode of Big Blue Banter is brought to you by Prize Picks. Head on over to Prize Picks and use promo code BANTER, and they'll match up to $100 on a new deposit. Thank you and enjoy.
Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier, joined as always my co-host Nick Filato, and we're moving forward here. The draft is close at this point. I don't know when this podcast will drop, but the draft is within weeks, within days, depending on when you're listening to this, and we're working through our quarterback evaluations. We've done Jaden Daniels, and we've done, I might blank in the other one we don't, JJ McCarthy, of course. I was thinking about the other guy. And now we're going to do our third one. It's Drake Maye, the quarterback out of North Carolina. This is a quarterback. If you followed me on Twitter, you know I'm a very, very big fan of Drake Maye. And this goes back to really his freshman season. That was when he really caught my attention. The first game I ever watched of Drake Maye, I personally felt like I saw something special there. And we're going to go through today why some of those things remain the same. And then some of the strengths, some of the weaknesses, NFL projection potentially, some advanced stats, and how he might fit the Giants, Nick. But before we get into that, I have a weird premonition thing that happened that's never happened to me before. So I wanted to share it on the podcast.
Okay.
So I've heard in the past, and this happens to people who are, watching or talking about something late at night before they go to sleep. So I think this is why this has happened to me, but it's the first time it's happened to me. And a couple nights ago, maybe it was like a week ago at this point, I was watching late film of Drake Maye late because I think we were planning to do this podcast for a little while. And for the first time ever, Nick, this has never happened to me before. It's happened to a bunch of people. I had a dream about the Giants. I've had like in the past, I've had dreams like years ago, but it's never like a draft dream or like a prediction type of dream. Like my biggest dream that I've had about the Giants has always been like somehow the game is going on, a regular season game, and I like missed it. And I'm like, how I never miss games? Like what happened? Like what's the score? And I'm like panicking and scrambling to find out information. I'm like, how could I have missed it? But in this dream, Nick, it was super odd. So I was in MetLife Stadium. And my parent in the old seats, so it was the old MetLife Stadium, not the new one, in my old seats where we used to sit. And somehow, some way, the NFL draft was going on, Nick, but like no one had information. So I was the first to get information. John Mara like walked to my seats with Jason Garrett. So weird.
What the hell was Jason Garrett doing there?
I don't know.
What year is this?
John Mara and Jason Garrett walked to my seats. And then John whispered something to Jason, and Jason came over to me, and he said, Drake Maye is the pick. The Giants are drafting Drake Maye. And then I spent a car ride home with just Jason Garrett driving, talking about Drake Maye and the pick.
What was his insights?
I don't even remember. Like, I have no specific insights from Jason Garrett on Drake Maye or anything I remember. All I really remember is John Mara and Drake and Jason Garrett coming up to me in Giants Stadium, telling me Drake Maye was the Giants draft pick, and the Giants drafted Drake Maye, and then me driving home with Jason Garrett. So very weird premonition. I woke up from that thinking, like, what the hell just happened to me? How was Jason Garrett there? What did he have to do anything? But I wanted to share that premonition in case it comes true.
And then Dan woke up and he had to change his shorts.
Yeah, no, there was none of that. There's none of that. Yeah, just a weird dream I wanted to share. I was very surprised that I was thinking about the Giants in the dream. I guess it had to do with watching late night quarterback film. So let's talk a little bit about this prospect and what he might mean for the Giants and some strengths and weaknesses, things of that nature. So want to start to do this one like we did the last one, Jaden Daniels, not like the McCarthy one. So let's start with just strengths you've seen on tape, Nick.
I'm going to start by reading through the strength portion of the synopsis. I think that's the best way to synthesize this.
Yes.
So Drake Maye is big, strong, mobile, tough, and his tape has highlight throws scattered throughout. He flashes an impressive understanding of timing and how to throw receivers open with an aggressive penchant for attacking tight windows over the middle of the field. Ample confidence and arm talent allow Maye to attempt throws that most other quarterback prospects fail to try. Drake Maye has a rare ability to generate throwing windows through anticipatory passing and ball placement that narrowly evades the defender over the middle of the field. In doing so, his receivers are forced to make tough but achievable catches at the limits of their catch radius. This happens when stagnant and on the move, vertically and horizontally. Of course, any quarterback would benefit from having a top pass catcher on their team. However, not every quarterback will put that star receiver into a position to utilize his elite skill set by deliberately challenging the boundaries of the receiver's orbit while accurately taking into account the receiver's spatial relationship with the defenders. Maye had several elite level throws on tape that weren't secured by the receiver. One may surmise the throw was off target, for the pass wasn't an easy catch, but in many cases, it was the only location where the receiver could realistically haul in the pass. These throws put Maye's offense in a position of success that does not exist with many other quarterbacks. Now, I wanted to really lay out that framework because that is the reason why I am so intrigued with Drake Maye. I have other positives that we can get into here in a little bit, but it's just, and I'm talking about several, man. It wasn't once, it wasn't twice. There were so many times on tape in 2023, his bad year, where he was releasing the football before the receiver got into this portion where he was going to make the catch. And there was no opportunity for the defender to read exactly where that receiver was going to go. So Drake Maye was anticipating where the receiver was going to be and then placing the ball with the right touch between where the safety was and the linebacker in the middle of the field. He put that ball right where the receiver had to be to make that catch. And sometimes it was a difficult catch, but he wasn't getting his receivers cold clocked, right? But it might've been like a diving catch. And I think if you pair this kid with an above average receiver, somebody who can make those tough catches over the middle of the field, he's going to try the throws that a lot of other quarterbacks aren't going to try. Now, the NFL level, some of those might be intercepted. I get that. But man, the confidence and the foresight that Drake Maye has, those anticipatory skills that we talk about so often, Drake Maye has that in spades, littered throughout his tape.
And I think you're right to say that, Nick, because I think as we watch the tape, we can just see the massive difference between how many NFL level anticipatory throws in areas of the field, intermediate, deep, middle, that, are available to you as an NFL quarterback are on his tape versus the rest of this class. And it's part of why I'm so much higher on his projection than a lot of these quarterbacks. And I know it's a difficult task to figure out quarterbacks going into the NFL. All right, let's roll some plays while we talk through Drake Maye. And I think to the crux of what you said, Nick, really what it comes down to is a lot of what you discussed is projectable to the NFL. And I think that's the biggest difference in how some people view Drake Maye versus how some people view a lot of these other quarterbacks. You talked about some of those high-level anticipatory throws to the second level, and I put that in my notes. There's a lot of second window throws as well from Drake Maye, which I don't see from a lot of quarterbacks. These are all kind of intangible type traits-based things, not named Caleb Williams. And I think the problem for me with just some of the quarterback evaluation across the board in the NFL, in the media landscape is there's too much reliance on what they see on the film. Oh, is this throw off target? Is this throw on target? How's the footwork? All the things that can be corrected. And there's less reliance on the things that are just there or not. And, a lot of what Jaden Daniels and Michael Penix do is, Nick, these are NFL throws. Like, these will translate to the NFL level. These are the windows that are available to you in the NFL. These are the types of throws that are available to you in the NFL. So, I like that you brought that up as the first point. I want to give a little background on Drake Maye, though, as we run through some of these plays, Nick. He was a 4-star recruit who originally committed to Alabama, but flipped to North Carolina so he could be closer to home. 6'4" and 1/4 and 223 pounds, Nick. This is probably the only quarterback prospect in this class, at least at the top, outside of like the Joe Milton types, with an actual frame, with an NFL frame that you're looking for. Over 6'4", 233 pounds to withstand the hits and to kind of play at a level that you hope for a long period of time. Not much of an injury history at all. A little bit of an ankle injury in 2022, I believe it was, but didn't miss much time. Former, brother of North Carolina basketball player Luke Maye, son of former North Carolina quarterback Mark Maye, played 3 sports in high school: baseball, basketball, and football. The baseball background you can see in some of his throws. We'll show later. I'll show one where he's just completely off platform, changing his arm slot. And I think you can see the baseball background when he's changing his arm slot on a lot of these throws. Specifically, the one that comes to mind is against NC State when he's rolling to his left on a speed out after he changes the play at the line of scrimmage and then is able to kind of flip his hips, rolling to his left as a right-handed thrower and just throw from a 3/4 arm slot. And I think the baseball background comes into play on that one. So that's kind of the overall just baseline that I'm setting for him. And then we can talk about some other stuff, Nick. But anything you want to get into from some of the plays that you ran that you saw?
What's going on, Big Blue Banter listeners? I'm excited for the football season for several reasons. And one of those reasons is Prize Picks, which is North America's largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform. And it's so simple to use. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including professionals, sharks, and people who are going to exploit you, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you just watch the winnings roll in. It's very simple to play and gives you a little extra skin. I've set my picks in less than 60 seconds. There are so many stats to choose from, and the withdrawals of funds are easy and quick. Dan and I will be adding a segment to our show before every game where we pick our favorite stats, more or less yards or touchdowns, what have you, and we'll be discussing why from a scheme, matchup, and game theory perspective. I love their promotions and how easy their interface is to operate at Prize Picks. I may select more on tackles for a loss from Bobby Okereke or Kayvon Thibodeau next game. They also do other sports as well. It's a really cool experience. Please join Dan and I in the fun of Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/banter and use code BANTER for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/banter and use code BANTER for a first deposit match up to $100. You will not regret it. You ever feel sluggish or out of focus? Are you stressed? Has your digestive system caused discomfort or flatulence like a certain co-host on this podcast during a live stream? If so, you should check out AG1. When I started drinking AG1 daily, I could feel a real difference in my daily health. I had more energy, I was better off at the gym, and I could focus on my work in a much more efficient manner. That's because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. Not only did I replace my multivitamin with AG1, but I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. I recommend AG1 to all my family and friends because AG1 has a team of doctors and scientists that formulate around the latest science and maintains high quality standards within the industry. Even my friends have started drinking AG1, and they always tell me how energetic they feel and how it's helped them out at the gym, and also it's helped them manage their stress levels. That's why we're happy to have AG1 as our partner. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs when you first subscribe. Go to drinkag1.com/banter. That's drinkag1.com/banter to check it out. Our mental and physical well-being is of the utmost importance. Whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all need to take that very seriously. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of the Big Blue Banter podcast. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or EE System. If you haven't heard of the EE System yet, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in New York, New Jersey, Arizona, if you will, or hundreds of other locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. Interested in experiencing the EE System technology for yourself? Go to unifiedhealing.com/banter to learn more and find a center near you. That's UNIFYD healing.com/banter. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment. And before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, include EE System. But if you're watching on YouTube, there's just so many tight window throws where he's throwing it right as the receiver breaks or right before the receiver breaks and is getting exactly where it needs to be. And if it was a split second late or a split second early, it might have been a little bit behind him, or he might have got his ass killed, the wide receiver that is. Understanding of how to maximize that and the confidence to do that is what I love most about Drake Maye, as I said in my opening synopsis. And you're going to see a bunch of plays like that throughout this film. And there are going to be issues we're going to get into. Trust me, I have a lot of worry with Drake Maye as well, but it's just, you just don't see a lot of players possess that quality. And I think we talked about this on the mailbag, if I'm not mistaken, that how many quarterbacks going through the draft have that quality combined with his arm talent?
That's the thing. It's probably non-existent outside of Caleb Williams, right?
In this draft class, yes, but even in past draft class, like the
Oh,
more recent draft class.
good question. In more recent draft classes, that I'd have to look back and think about some of those evaluations. I mean, obviously, we've seen at the NFL level, CJ Stroud has demonstrated it. And I think there was somebody who was doing a good job comparing some of what they saw on tape with Drake Maye to some of those high level plays from CJ Stroud. But, you'd have to go back. There's just not that many that combine those two traits. And those are projectable traits at the NFL level. You just showed a good example of him, changing his arm slot on that one as well and still getting a lot of power and drive behind the football.
Resetting his feet.
I mean, especially when you combine those, eyes are always downfield with Drake Maye. I'll get into some of what I like, and that's one of them. There's another drop from his wide receiver, by the way. And there's a lot of great balls that he put on tape that were dropped by the wide receiver. And these are I'm talking about intermediate, tight window throws down the field, would have been explosive big plays dropped by the wide receiver. But the two traits you're talking about that are both projectable at the NFL level, Nick, when you also combine that with the fact that how many of those quarterbacks that you can even look at were also 6'4.5", 233, and had the NFL frame that we're looking for, then the list gets even smaller.
No, of course. And those are all aspects of Drake Maye's game that I appreciate. And I mentioned in my synopsis about the receiver, like you pair him with a really good receiver. That's excellent. And you say that about any quarterback and people are like, oh, no shit. But it's like some quarterbacks are going to maximize the skill set of that receiver more so than others. Right. And I think Drake Maye is one of the quarterbacks who's really going to allow that receiver to thrive and put that receiver into positions to showcase how skilled he actually is by having him make difficult catches that just are not there for other quarterbacks because those other quarterbacks do not challenge the defense like Drake Maye does.
Correct, Nick. And I think part of this is also just you can look at the stats that back this up, even in a down year, quote unquote, 2023. And I want to get into some of 2022 because I think it's not fair personally that every time I see a stat on this quarterback class, it's just about 2023. Like Jaden Daniels in 2020, all his other years didn't throw the ball down the field. Then he gets Malik Neighbors, in that LSU offense in that system, and he's got a great big time throw rate. Does that mean I want to just discount all the other years? Same thing goes for Drake Maye. But even in his quote unquote down year, Drake Maye just through the roof when it comes to big time throws, led college football in last time years in quote unquote big time throws. That's a stat from PFF, which kind of talks a little bit what you're discussing, those tight windows, those intermediate range. And what I was discussing before, as far as the drop passes go, Nick, in big spots, like you showed a couple just on your film review. These are, 20, 30, 40-yard plays that don't go on a stat sheet because the receiver dropped it. According to the stats, North Carolina pass catchers dropped the football at a rate of 8.2% last year. That was higher than for any other top quarterback prospect in this class or any other full-time starting quarterback in the NFL would have been the highest. For context, USC drop rate was 3.9% for Caleb Williams. And based on Maye's throwing volume, an 8.2% drop rate is the equivalent to 35 additional catches, a number that would have moved his 2023 completion rate from 63.3% to 71.5%. And of course, no one's going to catch every pass. Like the drop rate's never going to be 0%. But if you go from 8.2% to like 3.9%, you're talking about a massive difference in completion rate. And he threw for 66% completion rate, Nick, in 2022 as a freshman at UNC. So I think it would probably be closer to that, maybe 60 to 67. But the key for me is a lot of these drops were like, again, big time throws that would have been 30, 40-yard gains.
Oh man, it's such a beautiful ball placement right here on this deep seam between the three defenders. Just hits him right in stride and it's dropped and it's just like, damn, dude. That's to the point that I was making before, though, Dan. It's a good receiver makes that catch. It's a catchable ball right out in front of the wide receiver. A good receiver is going to haul that in. And right. I just don't know if a lot of quarterbacks are trying throws like this in the soft area of the field, 20 yards down the football field.
Exactly. They're not trying throws like this, but also I look at throws like this, the one you just showed against Georgia Tech, and there's others as well. This is another good one, as throws that might be available at the NFL level. The problem for me is I look at some of these other quarterbacks making throws that just aren't available at the NFL level.
You're seeing some negative plays. I probably cut up a couple negative plays too, and we're going to get into the negatives here shortly. And I got to say, like plays that you're watching right now, like what you're seeing right now, that's also littered through his tape. And that's a big problem that I have with Drake Maye. We'll get into that in a little bit, though. But
the mechanical issues. Correct. I'm going to get into some of what happened in 2022, too, though, because I don't think it's discussed in everything, and I want to bring it up on this podcast. In 2022, in Maye's first start ever as a freshman for UNC, he went 29 of 37 with 349 total yards and 5 touchdowns. He lost just one game in 2022, and in that game, he threw for 301 yards and 5 touchdowns. Maye had 5 games in 2022, where UNC was tied or trailing in the second half, and he won those games. In the playoff era, only 22 other quarterbacks have ever done that. His passing last year, the first 5 games, now we go back to 2023. It's really those last 4 games that brought down his passing. Because in his first 5 games, he completed 70% of his passes, 319 passing yards per game, average 19 touchdowns, 1 interception. Then next 5, 70%, 363 passing yards per game, 15 passing touchdowns, 2 interceptions. It was those final 4 games where he really struggled, and we're going to take a look at that. But in 2022, he was also the ACC Player of the Year. He had 5 different games where he combined for at least 5 touchdowns, which is insane, honestly. In 2022, Nick, he also counted for 79% of North Carolina's offense because he also had the 717 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns. Caleb Williams won the Heisman in 2022, making up 66% of the team's offense. The next quarterback was CJ Stroud at 56%. I mean, 79% of the team's total offense is as much put the team on your back as I can even imagine is possible for a quarterback. And these are all college stats, so I want to keep that in context, but just like to give these as well as the 2023 stats, because I don't think you could just throw out 2022 when in 2023 Drake Maye lost 180 of his targets to vacated players, 2 O-linemen, and also went from Phil Longo's system to a terrible offensive system that didn't fit his skill set or work for him. So I just want to put that out there.
I'm not sure if it was a terrible offensive system. It's just a different offensive system that
I think you
can.
Terrible. That's my opinion. Watching the film, I thought the route combinations were considerably worse, and I did not like what I saw on tape from the system. Just my opinion.
Yeah, no, and that's fine. But I think the footwork issues that we're going to get into here in a little bit, as Sean McAvoy, the quarterback coach that we had on Monday, if anybody wants to check out that podcast, as he astutely pointed out, I think some of those could be a byproduct of being in Phil Longo's system, which is an air raid system. So it's more of I'm going to drift back. It's not as crisp, like boom, 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 hitch, timing, rhythm, West Coast principled type of system. So I think that could be something that could get ironed out. Maybe he formed bad tendencies. I really can't speak on that. I can tell you on film, they definitely were bad tendencies, but I don't know exactly what he was being coached to do. He definitely seemed to take liberties with his drop back, right? Like there were times where it was one way and it looked like it could be okay. And there were times where you're just like, what the hell are you doing with your front foot? Why are you picking it up and putting it down like 3 or 4 times? Like what's going on with this? So that's something that must be considered. And it's probably a big reason why he had so many accuracy issues, but just stuff like this, man, like fitting the football. If you're watching on YouTube, like, look, he's already releasing this football. He sees the safety, bail, right? He sees the safety at the bottom of the screen, bail right here. The safety's going over. He's going to cloud over the top of, I think that's Walker. And you could see Maye notice that, sees the safety in the middle of the field. So he's starting to release this football right as the tight end is starting to bend around the linebacker. You see they're basically parallel right now. That line or that apex defender, that might be Peyton Wilson. I think this is North Carolina State. So athletic linebacker. And then the tight end. And he's able to just put it right where it needs to be caught. And the freaking receiver drops it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of these types of throws like we talked about.
And again, difficult pass, right? But he's making an opportunity for his receiver to have a difficult pass without getting him killed. That's what you got to ask for your quarterback, man.
Right. Some people will look at this and be like, the ball placement was off, but it's like, no, that's exactly where you need to put the ball. Because if you throw that high, you're leading him into the defender and you're getting your receiver killed.
Look how just narrow that throwing window is. And he puts it there, man. I know I've stressed this a lot, but it's
important
unique.
to stress, though, because the narrow throwing windows are what's available at the NFL level. And the rest is not available. It's just not there. You don't have space on the outside like Penix and Daniels are throwing into.
And the play right here, too. This is just touch. This is the difference between him and J.J. McCarthy, because we like how J.J. McCarthy also has his confidence to challenge the middle of the field. But J.J. McCarthy does not do this. He doesn't put just enough over the top, right? And he's getting hit. He knows the pressure is coming. So this also shows poise. It shows toughness. And he puts just enough over the top of that underneath defender and drops it perfectly in. That is great trajectory going downward. You put just enough touch and just enough pace on that football to drop right where your receiver is going to be. And if you look at this receiver, there's 5 North Carolina State defenders all around him. And the ball is catchable just for that player. That's impressive, man.
It is. And the way that I've heard it described by like Daniel Jeremiah is layering the football. That's what the scouts or whatever refer to it as, layering the football. And I think it's important to note because I don't think a lot of these quarterbacks are doing that. They're not layering the football over into windows and over defenders coverage. And you're bringing up a big play here that I wanted to discuss for those who are watching on YouTube. And it's this play against North Carolina State. If you can run it back real quick. And it's just an interesting example of a few things that I see working here. So if you pause it at the top here, you can do it from this view. It's fine either way. So one thing I like a lot about Drake Maye from a positive side, Nick, is on all the supposed bad games from Drake Maye, like NC State and Clemson, there are examples of big-time NFL plays and throws that he makes that, to me, are more important than seeing a quarterback light up some bad defense for 500 yards and 5 TDs on throws and plays that just aren't available at the NFL level. I'd rather see things that can translate. So this is a great example of it. You don't see it in this clip, Nick, but on the breakdown I saw, you can see it. Before this snap, Nick, he actually audibled himself, which we don't see a lot of college quarterbacks do. He audibled and changed the play based on the pre-snap coverage and blitz he assumed from NC State. What he changed it to was a speed out rolling to his left, and he's able to change out of the incorrect play to the correct play. Once he's able to do that, now he still needs to do a few things. He needs to get himself out of the pocket while rolling to his left as a right-handed thrower. He needs to be able to throw and flip his hips, and he needs to be able to throw from an off-balance platform while also throwing from a different arm slot and putting it in that in mind, throwing from a different arm slot. He needs to be able to put a different trajectory on the football. And you could see it then from the end zone angle, but he throws this from a 3/4 arm slot. So I'm seeing big level NFL traits here. I'm seeing the ability to audible out of a play and change to the right play, and then the ability to throw from a different arm slot and make the pass, still have that accuracy and still have ball placement and still have speed to it. This is the type of stuff when I watch, Nick, I'm like, okay, these are NFL level examples. That's what I want to see. That's what I think translates.
And he also sets the protection as well. Like
right.
He moves his running back over. He says, this guy's going to come, and it's going to create a 3-on-3 to the roll side. So now I need to get out there, and the tackle doesn't even have to handle 8 with the running back in protection. Knows he's going to get hit, still delivers a football outside shoulder while rolling against the grain, dude. That's just impressive stuff. There's really no other way to quantify it.
And it's from his worst game. And the same thing goes for the Clemson game. We'll put up a play from that where I feel like he had one of the best plays of his college career in his worst game, quote unquote. And it's just, that's the type of stuff that I see. And it's just, I just very much so, I think there are issues with Drake Maye, and we'll talk about them like from a mechanical standpoint and things that could really derail his career. Like my low end comp for him is a player that hasn't made in the NFL. But I think a lot of what I see as the negatives on Twitter and whatever are just very overstated, overrated, or just totally wrong in a lot of ways, in my opinion. And that's kind of what stands out to me in some ways about Drake Maye, though I don't think like some of it is very real, and we're going to get to it. But I want to talk a little bit more about the positives before we move forward here. And I want to talk about another positive with Drake Maye that's underrated in my mind. It's his straight up. What are you smiling at?
I'm smiling at the play, man.
Okay. The one on YouTube. Yeah. For those watching.
Yeah.
Just fits it into an insane window right there.
Oh, absolutely. 3 defenders. That just happens a lot. It takes a lot of balls to do this, man, to challenge this window. Just fit that football in there and have the zip. See, on that play, he needed the zip. On the other play, he needed the touch to layer it. So it's just a bunch of different types of throws that he is unlocking, that he gives the offense. There's not a lot of quarterbacks that do that. We know this, right? But he allows the offense to use a bunch of different types of throws. We talk about using every inch of the football field. That's important. Drake Maye allowed you to do that, but also space in the air to manipulate defenders. And timing. Drake Maye has all of that within his arsenal.
100%. And those are all things, again, you can't teach. Those are all things that can translate to the NFL level if, of course, he does the other things well. But another thing I want to talk about that's underrated in his game is his pure straight up athleticism, Nick. I'm sure you noticed this watching the tape. And it's not just on it's scrambles, but it's also design runs. And the stats back this up. I mean, he had 717 yards, 7 rushing touchdowns his freshman year. I don't think people realize how good that is. This was a stat from Dane Brugler on. You know who has the only quarterback? You know who's after Jaden Daniels? Obviously, Jaden Daniels is number 1. But you know who's after Jaden Daniels in runs of 10-plus yards in college football the last 2 years? Not just this draft class, college football at the quarterback position. It's Drake Maye. And that's the thing that people don't realize about this dude. This dude can run the football. He's big. He's aggressive. I think he's closer to Josh Allen than Josh Herbert when it comes to running the football, though I don't think he's Josh Allen. But I think he's better than Justin Herbert in that regard.
I think that's going
to help. What'd you say?
That's fair.
That's fair. And I think that's going to help teams win football games. And you could see it in the red zone too. Like he's going to be a zone read weapon in the red zone as a rushing quarterback. Look at that throw he makes. I'm just watching Nick's film as he's going back. Like the ability to change that arm slot here and just flick that ball back that way. I see so many quarterbacks who just cannot do that. Physically cannot flip their hips and do that. They're over the top throwers who can't make that throw. And it just, he has that in his bag. He has the ability to change his arm slot in every possible way. But in addition to that, Nick, I think, some things that's interesting to me, he led all of college football over the last 2 seasons in big time throws. And you've done a great job breaking down why and showing some of them, but he also only had a 1.9% turnover rate, right? Like, it's not like he's just turning the football over left and right, throwing interceptions all game. And it's like, this is a quarterback prospect. Like, who is the quarterback prospect? Oh, Carson Palmer. I saw it at 72-49 0.9 touchdown interception ratio at the college level. Now, the game has changed so much. I think the stats comparing error to error mean nothing, but there have been quarterback prospects who have turned the ball over a lot at the college level. And he kind of has that billing, I feel like, from people like this, like aggressive, boomer best type quarterback, but he actually doesn't turn the ball over, hasn't yet that much. 1.9% turnover rates. That's something. You talked about the second window throws. One thing that I see from him in his tape that I don't see from all quarterbacks, and we'll show it on the Clemson example, is the ability to lead the ball into space and lead the ball toward the pylon when a receiver's running toward a pylon. We showed that in JJ McCarthy's tape in that throw against Minnesota, where he had a clean pocket and just kind of hung the ball up there, didn't lead into space. On the throw we'll show against Clemson, he has everything the opposite of a clean pocket, but still is able to kind of lead the ball into space. I just think his understanding of space post-snap, Nick, is the best in this class, personally.
Oh, absolutely. Now, Caleb, you can always make the argument for, but if we're just going to remove Caleb Williams, he understands space and where to throw the football. I think the play that I'm about to run on YouTube is an excellent indicator of that. Empty set. You're going to have the apex defender fly over to get the curl flat, and then the buzz defender is going to stay. And Drake Maye notices this right away. You can see right now, as I think that's Walker is passing the apex defender between the two safeties in a cover 3 defense. He's starting to release the football. This is what I am talking about. The football is starting to come out. He's already made the decision. He's rearing back. Walker's not even past the apex defender. And then look at where he puts the football. He puts it high so Walker can go up and get it. And both those safeties are almost to the hip, especially the deep third safeties, almost on the outside hip of Walker at this point. If the throw wasn't placed so optimally, this could easily be an incomplete pass, but Walker has to make a nice catch on the football here, and he does, and that's a touchdown. It's just perfectly layered with the perfect trajectory to just allow Walker to make a play on the football and no defender.
Excellent breakdown. And what you're seeing there is a lot of NFL level traits there. You're seeing anticipatory throwing, first of all. The ball's out before the wide receiver is open. That's something we talk about all the time on the Big Blue Banter podcast with the Giants quarterbacks over the last few years and how important that is in the NFL level. What you're also seeing is, again, aggressiveness to fit it into a tight window, which you showed there. And then finally, the ball placement to put that ball on that spot on a line with the velocity as well. Like, those are 4 things you're seeing in that clip that just aren't available a lot. And there's a lot of anticipatory passes on his film. And that's kind of goes into another knock of his, Nick. Like, I agree with a lot of the knocks, like the mechanics and the footwork and just some of what you see as far as pressure being an issue, like his ability to kind of bounce in the pocket. He doesn't always stay in the pocket. That I think are all issues. But when they talk about the processing as an issue for Drake Maye, Nick, I look at it like, what are you watching that I'm missing? Because I've watched a lot of film of a lot of these quarterbacks this year, Nick. I think from an anticipatory throwing standpoint and from a processing standpoint, like you just said, understanding the defense post-snap and then where to go with the football. And that example, NC State, is another good example. It's kind of different. It's changing the alignment based on what you see pre-snap, changing the play. But I'm talking more about understanding the coverages and then where to throw the football with anticipation. I kind of feel like he does a better job of that anyone in this class besides Caleb Williams. And I stand by that. And I don't really understand. Maybe you can say Michael Penix, but I think they're kind of reading the game very differently in the throws that they're making. Like, it's easy to call what Penix does anticipatory throwing, and the same thing for Jaden Daniels. I just don't know if I agree with it, because like throwing a slot fade over the top into space, you can call it anticipation. I could just call it you understanding that your Malik Neighbors is going to win that every time, so you can have the confidence to throw it. These throws over the middle of the field, though, that Drake Maye makes, and some of the outside the numbers stuff with anticipation, it's different to me. It's a different level of anticipatory processing. So I don't really agree at all. I can agree with some of the knocks on Maye. I do not agree with the processing as a knock.
Yeah, I can get into that in a little bit. And this play right here that I have up is another indicator of a quick process. Look, post snap, you're going to have this linebacker bail to a curl flat, and it's going to create a 3/2 on that side of the field. That's where Drake Maye initially looks, as you could see right here on YouTube. So what does he do? He realizes the numbers are not on his side. So he peers towards the seam of the number 2 receiver on the backside of the play. And that seam attracts 3 defenders. And you can see Maye quickly realize that the deep third defender is also staying high and over top that seam, influencing inside kind of towards the numbers, meaning that the hitch on the outside from the number 1 receiver is open, and Maye quickly processes that, fires the football, and picks up just a couple yards. And it's just a full field read. You don't see many full field reads. You don't want to see many full field reads, because that typically means that you don't have answers from the things that you do see. But on the play that I just broke down, that was the answer. Right. And he quickly got to it. Right. 1, 2, 3. Okay. None of it's there. Oh, okay. 3 guys on the seam. Sweet. That means there's going to be a little bit of breathing room for the hitch. Let me hit the hitch. And that's something that we also see. And to your point about The processing, I agree. I think people have issues with Drake Maye's processing because he has a couple like dumb interceptions on his tape.
Yeah.
Like, I understand where they're going with, but I see next level processing as well. But I've also seen some evaluations of Drake Maye where people who I really respect in the industry are like, yeah, he doesn't really throw with anticipation, or he could do a better job throwing with anticipation. And I'm like, I honestly don't know what tape you're watching. I don't.
I have
Because
trouble with that too. Yeah. And in that regard, like, what are these other quarterbacks doing that they don't have that negative in their scouting profile, right? Because I'm not seeing it from them. If you're not considering what he's doing as anticipatory throwing, and you just went over like 5 examples, these are not the only examples. And now you're going to show the Clemson play. This one to me is a great example of another, this is one of his worst games, Clemson, even though the fact his defense never got a stop. This is one of his worst games. And yet I'm seeing real things that could translate to the NFL, like this play, versus a lot of people's best games where it's just easy college level shit all game that never translates.
Exactly, man. So like there's 2, 3, 4 every game highlight level throws where you're just like, whoa, not a lot of quarterbacks can do that. And Drake Maye can. And I think that's probably a good segue though.
Go back to
I want to get into
real quick.
You want to go back to the Clemson one? Okay, let's go back to the Clemson one. Sorry, podcast guys.
Just for the YouTube guys. I mean, look at this play for an example of 2 things. 1, the ability to throw off platform and generate velocity, but just 2, leading the receiver into space. He's not just throwing the receiver open. It was almost dropped. It's how bad of a hands catcher Devontae. I think that was Devontae Walker, right?
I'm not sure if that was Walker. It might have been Walker. Look, man, Walker's interesting, like from the standpoint that he'll make some really impressive catches. He's a fluid athlete, but the hands are definitely a problem. That manifested at Senior Bowl too.
I'm not a Devontae Walker guy, but I know he's got physical traits that could be interesting if he does develop them. But like, this is an example of him throwing the ball into space, leading the receiver toward the pylon. That's something I see on his tape a lot with his throws down the field. And this one is against Pitt. It's just a good example of how good his arm talent is naturally, and he doesn't need a clean base to throw from. Like, this is a long developing flea flicker, and he knows he's about to get clobbered, which is another good part about Drake Maye's game. And same thing with JJ McCarthy. When they're about to get hit, they still stand tall and deliver the football, and they don't just try to escape and roll to the right or, wilt under pressure. But before we get to the negatives, is that where you want to go? I want to get into a few more positives.
We can still with the positives. We talked a lot about the arm talent and everything, and
sure.
I have one more thing I want to say about Drake Maye.
Sure.
Just on the second part of the synopsis. Let me just pull it up real quick. No, it's just basically talking about the zip and the velocity and how he doesn't seem rattled in the pocket and how he typically keeps his eyes downfield, which is another thing I feel like is knocked on Drake Maye sometimes. He's decisive, right? There are times where he drops his eyes and he runs, but when he does that, he typically gets like 15, 16 yards. Like he knows that the rushing path is there. He's aware that there is a rushing path to be had. But if he's not aware of negatives, but it bleeds into what I just said, there are times, though, Dan, where he does try to hit the home run. Right. And there is a check down or there's a 5-yard gain on his tape. It's just, a couple plays that you kind of notice throughout his evaluation.
I completely agree with that. But I wanted to touch a little bit on what you just said, because I think that's the key there. And there's stats that back it up. To me, he does a great job of keeping his eyes downfield. And that's one of his best traits, the ability to keep your eyes downfield when you're running. And yes, there are examples where you'll see him just put his head down like a Jaden Daniels. But I think you made a great point there, Nick. It's when he's decisive about it, and he's right most of the time. And here's the stat that backs it up. Among 35 quarterbacks with 30 or more scrambles in 2023, Maye finished second best in first down rate and was second best in EPA, expected points added, via his scramble. So when he was deciding to put his head down and scramble, he made the right decision, and it's evidenced by that. So it's not like, some of these guys you see when they put their head down, it almost looks like they just made their mind up and that's it. And it doesn't always look like the right decision because they're either getting clobbered within a few feet or they're not getting a lot of yards or maximizing it. Or if they do, it's just based on their unique athleticism versus the college players they're facing against. And that may not be the case when the speed, when it really speeds up the NFL level. So I actually find this to be more of a positive to his game than anything else.
I mean, he's strong in the pocket, as you just saw on YouTube. Now, I'll say, and I brought this up with Sean as well.
Sure.
There are times where he's in this situation. Oh, no, I'm sacked. And then he throws an interception. I think he had 2 of those this season.
Too many hero ball plays.
A little bit too many hero ball plays. Sometimes you just got to take a sack, but he has this in his arsenal too, where he does throw like an accurate pass with a 235-pound linebacker draped all over him, like deceptively strong. Like, I think JJ McCarthy is stronger than he's given credit for in the pocket, but like Drake Maye is on another level when it comes to that.
completely a different level when it comes to training. And that's to be expected, right? He's 6'4.5",
Yeah.
233 naturally. And that's as a 21-year-old human being. He's probably going to get to like 238 of natural weight, I would assume, as he grows into his body, because he's, on the younger side. He's not Michael Penix, 24, or Bo Nix, whatever these guys are, 24, 25. He's a younger prospect. And so I think that natural frame to have that, Nick, we discussed this last year with Bryce Young. I don't want to lose sight of it, how important it is to have a quarterback who's 6'4", 230, and what that means as projection to the next level, and how few of those are in this draft class and how few of those are in draft classes alone that also can play the position, that aren't just raw talent,
Absolutely, man. So, do we get into the negatives here?
One more positive I want to present, because
Okay.
it's been discussed as a negative, and it's his maneuverability and pocket manipulation, because I think he can get better at deciding when to stay in the pocket and manipulate the pocket. I think that's a negative to his game, too many escape pockets. But I think his feel for the pocket is a plus. Does that make sense? I think he understands pressure and when to get rid of the football better than people realize, but he can do a better job of just staying in the pocket more often and not escaping pockets. So I want to show an example of what I mean by that. And so I'm going to present the screen real quick here. Hopefully it gets to where I want to get to. This is not the best of banter for right now, but do you see this play? I'm going to turn this up here. Can you see the play now, Nick?
Yes.
Okay. So this to me is a good example of what I was discussing here. It's a play against Miami. You could just see here, he's maneuvering within the pocket, finds the lane he needs to step up to, and then throws the ball. Those are eyes downfield the whole time. Now, this also touches on another excellent trait of Drake Maye's, in my opinion, which is his arm talent. Like, look at this freaking throw. That's a laser beam from the far hash across his body that hits the receiver in the perfect spot. This is insane level arm talent compared to some of these quarterbacks that I see on a year-to-year basis.
Insane level arm talent. All right. So we're going to go back to some of the plays if you're watching on YouTube. So let me ask, why are there reservations, Dan?
Yes.
Why are there reservations? And this is a part of the synopsis. It really comes down to inconsistent accuracy, specifically on layup passes, which are wildly frustrating, to be honest with you. Maye lacks structure in his drop back. His footwork needs a refined process. His front foot is erratic with its placement, and he doesn't always align his body to the target. This could be the catalyst for his frustrating propensity to nosedive easy flat passes into the deck at the receiver's feet. It's not a once-a-game phenomenon, unfortunately. It happens far too frequently. This problem may be attributed to Maye's experience with Phil Longo's air raid system, which has a drop-back process different from the conventional offenses. Maye played with Chip Lindsey last season, and some of the erratic footwork could be a product of his time in the air raid. It's difficult to tell. And then I'll just finish it up. Overall, he is a good processor, but he also leaves some plays on the field and makes reckless last-second decisions when he gets hit. He's talented and strong enough to complete passes with defenders draped on him. He should be applauded for that grit, but he's also thrown directly to defenders in similar situations. So learning when to eat a sack could be useful, but hopefully not employed often. Few players in recent college football memory process the combination of Maye's size, athletic ability, arm talent, arm strength, and calculated aggressive nature to challenge windows that will be slightly ajar. For that, his ceiling resembles the Sistine Chapel in height and in beauty. However, he's far from perfect as a prospect or a sure bet.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think there are big reservations. Like, this is, so I'll get into the lower end comp right now, what I have for him. If things don't work out for him and he either goes to the wrong team or just doesn't develop the things that you just discussed, the negatives, I could easily see him being the next Sam Darnold. Easily, right?
You stole that from me.
No, this is okay. Let me make it clear. This is Nick's comp, but it's so you put it in my head. It's like all these comps. If somebody puts it in my head, this is Nick's comp. Let me make it clear. This is Nick's comp that he told me. But once he told me it, I can't stop seeing it as the negative.
Dude, so I actually went back and watched 2016 Sam Darnold tape because I was curious, and it is similar.
It's very similar.
Sam Darnold was layering throws over the middle of the field at USC.
Sam Darnold can layer throws, and I love Sam Darnold coming out. And so did, Daniel Jeremiah had him not only as his number one prospect, but Daniel Jeremiah was like, this is a all franchise altering prospect. You trade up everything for him, like that type of thing. And a lot of people are wrong about him. I will go to my death, though, Nick, and say that I personally, from watching both these guys on film, think Drake Maye had better arm talent than Sam Darnold. And to me, it's just a noticeable difference. I can't quantify it. It's just something I see when I watch the tape. Because Sam Darnold on the deep vertical path, to me, was not driving the football the way that Drake Maye drives the football.
I think
but
that's
he did layer throws. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Okay, so you agree with me on that. But he did layer throws. And I think from the footwork standpoint and the bounciness standpoint and the mechanics standpoint, I could totally see him being Darnold, just not working out from that standpoint at all. It's an issue. It's a definite issue.
The floor. It's the floor of Sam Darnold.
Sure.
Yes. So what are you talking about there? You're talking about a talented quarterback who multiple teams have tried to just salvage, right? The team that drafted him,
Right.
the Jets, he goes to Carolina. Now he's with the 49ers. Now he's with the Vikings, actually, but he was
Right.
with the 49ers, right? And he's still like 27 years old. That could
Yeah.
be a path for Drake Maye, but I think that is the floor because there's so much raw talent that you just cannot teach with Drake Maye. It seems like everything's clicking in the top of his head as well. I don't know whatever happened wrong with Sam Darnold. He had the mechanical issues that we see with Drake Maye from like a footwork and a throwing mechanics standpoint. Right. But it did seem like a lot of Sam Darnold's issues was just not really adapting to the NFL speed and not adapting to pressure and kind of getting rattled. That's what it seemed like because there was some good Sam Darnold tape throughout his career, and then it would just like all fall apart. And it was like, oh my God, what are you doing? You can't be a franchise quarterback with games like this. So Drake Maye needs to prove that he can get over that type of hump from like a mental standpoint. I love the fact, dude, that he has like 3 older brothers. He's the youngest in a uber hyper competitive family. I don't know about you guys. If you guys had younger brothers, anybody listening to this, they get picked on, man. Younger brothers, my younger brother, me and my older brother, man, we picked on that kid. That kid is Teflon now, dude. You can't get under that kid's skin because growing up, he had 2 older brothers who were 5 and 7 years older than him. So I hope Drake Maye has that type of mentality, but obviously I'm just speaking anecdotally.
Well, you know, it's funny, Nick, you mentioned that. I've said this on a previous podcast. I'll say it again, and it has no backing, so just take it for what it's worth. When I first watched Drake Maye as a freshman in 2022, you know, I texted you about him early. I talked about his first game. That was phenomenal, the 5 touchdowns. But I watched him against an ACC opponent, and he just, to me, had the it factor. It's that you showed it on a play earlier, that 4th and 4, where he was almost sacked in the pocket, then got the football out and completed it. He just has, and he does it on some of these runs. He just has like this it factor to him that got me really excited about potential with him because I'm looking for some kind of top 5 type of quarterback long term. But you know, that's kind of conjecture, right? It's just something I saw, and you may see it, you may not. I don't want to put too much weight in it, but I do want to say but it's something you mentioned with like the brothers thing and the athletic family and the background playing 3 sports. But I want to say one thing about the Sam Darnold comparison as the floor. There's a really important thing. They're not, Drake Maye is a bigger athlete. He's 6'4.5". Darnold was 6'3.5", a little less, and 221 versus 231. But I just think they're completely different athletes outside of their frame. So, for example, Darnold, 26.5 vertical jump. Drake Maye, that's like one of the worst ever. Drake Maye didn't vertical jump, but I've seen him on film, and I think that vertical jump, and same thing with the broad jump, would be a lot more explosive. Those were both bottom barrel for Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold had a 4.4 short shuttle. There's not a chance in hell watching Drake Maye on tape he's going to have a 4.4 short shuttle. Sam Darnold, 4.85 40-yard dash. Drake Maye, you can see it on film when he breaks in the open space, is high 4.5s at worst, in my opinion, as a runner. And he didn't test, so we will never know just what it looks like on tape. 20-yard split, 10-yard split, not good for Sam Darnold. Those things will be good for Drake Maye. And it's not just based on what you see on tape, it's the stats too. Drake Maye ran for 717 yards and 7 touchdowns as a freshman in 2022. And I told you about the stat earlier where he had the most 10-plus yard runs of any college quarterback besides Jaden Daniels over the last 10 years. So I want to make that clear about the Sam Darnold comp as the low end. Sam Darnold was never anywhere near the athlete that Drake Maye is. And he's a good athlete in his own right, by the way.
He's a good athlete in his own right for a quarterback.
For a quarterback, I mean, right.
Yeah. I mean, dude, I didn't know it was that bad, the vertical jump.
It's bad. Yeah, he had no explosion.
That's bad, man. Holy crap.
Yeah, he had no explosion to his game. And I think Drake Maye has some explosion to his game as an athlete.
Yeah, I think Drake Maye overall is just a better athlete. And I also think he has a little bit more arm talent than Sam Darnold. But still, we'll put that at the floor because even if Sam Darnold was slightly better, it would have been a bust, right? Because it was a pretty bad bust. He would have had to be a much better.
To that point, even if he was a slightly better athlete, it could have been the same exact. Being a better athlete doesn't fix what Sam Darnold has struggled with the NFL, correct?
Yes, and I think his coach as a freshman, Sam Darnold, it wasn't Adam Gase. There was somebody there, but was it Todd Bowles? Was Todd Bowles the head coach when they drafted Sam Darnold in 2018?
Yes, he was. Yes, he was.
Yes, he was. Yeah, and then I think they changed OCs a bunch. His
Adam
number 1 receiver
right?
was
or no, that
was his head. That was his head coach.
Yeah. And the overall disaster there.
Yeah, but that Robbie Anderson, I think, was like his number 1 target his entire time there. So I'm hoping Drake Maye also finds himself into a more functional organization than the freaking New York Jets. And I would have to contend, even though the New York Giants have sucked for quite a while right now, the Giants are a more functional organization than the New York Jets. But you have to, hopefully. I do think, though, man, if he finds his way to Minnesota, not just for KOC, but for TJ Hawkinson and Justin Jefferson. It's
Madison.
And Addison, you're just like,
Two great offensive tackles.
That's a dream scenario. And I know his
him.
footwork isn't great for like the quick and rhythm type of system that KOC is looking for, Kevin O'Connell, but he's going to challenge the windows, and you have multiple pass catchers that are going to haul in those catches. So there's going to be so many highlight throws. People will be like, wow, what a throw. That's crazy. But if he's doing that I don't want to like crap on Wan'Dale. I love Wan'Dale Robinson. Wan'Dale Robinson has a 0 percentile wingspan. Like I think that those types of things and arm length, those types of things matter when you're challenging those really tight window throws, as you can see throughout the YouTube that we were running.
Sure. And on that front, as you can see, if you've watched on YouTube, just boil it down to the simplicity of how many of these throws that you just watched on YouTube versus the last two quarterbacks we put up there were thrown into a second window, one, or two, were thrown with anticipation. When they were thrown, when the ball was released, was he throwing to a receiver who was already open, or was he throwing into a space, an area where the receiver was going to get to? And that second thing is very important to whether or not a quarterback has a chance to work at the NFL level or not. And in my opinion, it's almost non-negotiable if you're looking at it. I want to talk about something else when it comes to his arm talent, Nick, as far as high-end comps go, right? So I think it's clear watching his film, he's got really good arm talent. In my opinion, I think it's by far and away the second best arm talent in this class. I don't think it's even remotely close. And you could talk about some of these other guys like Penix, but for what I look for, like Penix doesn't layer the ball the way this guy layers the ball. Penix doesn't drive the football the way this guy drives the football. And Penix doesn't throw from the different arm slots that this guy can throw from. And he doesn't, and you just showed a clip, I think, in a second window slant where he comes off read one, read two, and he didn't really need to reset the football. That's another thing I like. But on that note, we're always looking on this podcast, Nick. We always talk about this. When we're drafting a quarterback, we want someone who could be a top 5 or at worst top 10 in the NFL, because those guys give you a chance to win Super Bowls once you pay them in that second contract. I was looking back at it, Nick, thinking about the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now. Not a single one of them doesn't have elite arm talent. The only one who could be argued is Joe Burrow. So I'm going to run through it. But in my opinion, he has elite arm talent because of his anticipatory throwing the ball into space, and his ball placement and his ability to change trajectory. So I do not agree with that. He doesn't have elite arm talent. But the rest of these guys, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, CJ Stroud, every single one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL has elite arm talent. So
Matt
that's
Stafford.
Why I struggle.
There are even guys
Matt
like that.
Stafford.
Yeah.
Even the next window.
CJ
like the
Stroud,
quarterbacks, the non-elites that are close to elite, all have it. So am I going to bank on an outlier? Because I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think Jaden Daniels has elite arm talent. Would you agree with that?
I don't think it's elite. No, absolutely not.
I'm just speaking elite right now because all those guys who are,
I think it's slightly better than Daniel Jones.
Sure. And that's not elite.
Yes. No,
and all the quarterbacks we just mentioned have elite arm talent. Now, he has his own trump card. He can run with the football. I even think Lamar Jackson has elite arm talent or borderline elite arm talent. And I think it's borderline because the accuracy is off at times. But he can change slots and he could throw with a lot more.
He's creative and he's fun. But Lamar Jackson has worked and gotten more accurate as his career has progressed. But if we're talking elite, no, I don't think
probably next level. Yeah, but I would put him right up. No, he's not Stafford level either. But he does some things well from a pure arm talent standpoint. His issue is probably more ball placement and anticipatory throwing, which, are things that are part of arm talent. So let's put him to the side because he has his own trump card. He has the Jaden Daniels running ability trump card.
Absolutely.
But I feel like I'm banking more on if people are discussing, Drake Maye such an outlier. He's an ACC quarterback with tons of issues, his completion percentage under pressure and, these footwork and stuff. That will make you an outlier to some extent. But I think you're more of an outlier if you don't have elite arm talent as far as becoming an elite quarterback at the NFL level. And I got to be honest with you, like people love Michael Penix's arm talent. I like it. I do not think it's at the level of Drake Maye or Caleb Williams really at all. And I think Caleb Williams is even his own level above Drake Maye when it comes to arm talent from what I've seen. So it's just, I would rather bank on the arm talent. And if you have other traits that we like, the frame, the anticipatory throwing, the flashes of high-end upside. And you talked about KOC, right? Because I want to get into this part of this discussion now. You talked about KOC. Why aren't the Giants the best fit for Drake Maye? Outside of supporting cast, I think they are, because Brian Daboll's already done this before. He's worked with a quarterback.
The reason why I brought up KOC was the pass catchers, to the point that I made several times throughout the podcast about maximizing receivers, maximizing his skill set. That's why.
And that's a great point. And the Giants would have to build toward that, right? Like they're not going to have that right away for Maye in 2024, especially if they trade up for Maye. Then they're really
not. And they're not getting a Dunze, and they're not getting neighbors.
No, they're not even getting a second round.
They're not even getting a second round. Yeah. Say bye to Pearsall.
they would have to work up to that. And it wouldn't happen in year one. You're right. It would be there. Those types of receivers that fit his skill set that you're talking about would be there in year one. But as far as the development side of it goes, which ultimately I think might even be more important for him, because you mentioned it, there's a lot of issues with his footwork and with his mechanics that if they're not cleaned up, we're going to see a ton of these like drive McNabb type throws into the ground and outside, which you don't want to see. You never want to see skip throws. But Brian Daboll is the guy to really, if I'm putting him with any coach as far as like who can maximize his skill set and who can fix his flaws, it's Daboll. It's why the Giants to me are such a good fit for this type of prospect, because they may not have this cast yet for him, but they can get a cast for him. You can draft the cast next year or sign him in free agency or trade for them, maybe Brandon Ayuk, but you can't fix a quarterback's mechanics with every coach in every situation. And that's the key to me.
Let's do ceiling. And then let's talk about trade up scenarios, what we want to do. So who is your ceiling comp for him?
I've been struggling with this to have a ceiling comp. A lot of people say Josh Allen or Justin Herbert.
Yeah, those are the two. They're trite, and I hated it, but I went with Justin Herbert. Yeah,
I understand it. And stylistically, I think it makes sense. I saw a comp. You know how sometimes I'll see a comp and I can't get it out of my head.
Yeah, it makes sense, of course.
Okay, I saw a comp that's not going to make total sense, and it's not a full comp for who he is because one quarterback, he's just 70,000 times more athletic than this quarterback. But just from aesthetically how they throw the football and how they stand in the pocket, I saw the Carson Palmer comp. And I kind of loved a Carson Palmer comp. And he's an old quarterback. You might remember from 2003. And by the way, Drake Maye does not have the same kind of arm strength as Carson Palmer. Not many people in the history of the world have ever had his arm strength. And I would say Carson Palmer throws more velocity than Drake Maye as well. But the way they look throwing the football to me and the way they're able to layer those balls in intermediate levels of the field and put the right trajectory, touch, or drive if you need it into those tight spaces, it kind of reminded me of Carson Palmer, who, if he didn't have the injuries, would have been, an all-time quarterback, potentially in my mind, Hall of Famer. And obviously he wasn't athletic, Carson Palmer, and like he wasn't scrambling the way May does, or, he didn't have the impact as a running quarterback as well. But just that was the one that come to mind stylistically. And as far as high-end comps go, I would say Drake Maye has as much upside in my mind to be as good as Justin Herbert, if not better than Justin Herbert. I really do believe that, because Herbert has better arm talent and, in my opinion, a better understanding pre-snap. But I think he doesn't have he does have athleticism. He just doesn't have the willingness to run. I
feel like homeboy's always hurt though too.
He is.
I'm not trying to make excuses for Justin Herbert.
He
Justin Herbert, I think Justin Herbert's phenomenal. Like everyone who listens to this podcast knows that. I will say this though, he gets a lot of excuses. Right?
Yeah.
Like his teams haven't won anything. And I think it's fair to say that it's because the organization has failed Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert certainly hasn't just failed the organization, but there are other quarterbacks who have been in similar situations who get shit on, whereas Herbert doesn't. I think it's because the talent just pops off the screen. And that's the primary reason why a lot of people end up sticking up for him. But at a certain point, you got to start winning football games.
You do. And my one argument always to that, Nick, is that like, there are other quarterbacks who are not getting the same excuses, but those quarterbacks aren't putting up the stats that he's putting up. That's the difference. And people always say Daniel Jones doesn't get this, but like, look at Justin Herbert's numbers. He's passing the football like good, really, really good. Take a look at the passing yard. Take a look at the throws. Like
the Daniel Jones comparison.
One guy moves the football and the other guy doesn't move the football. That's a big factor. Neither's winning big games, but one's moving the football through the air consistently and scoring points, and the other's not. Like that is part of playing quarterback. It's not just winning. It's actually moving the ball and scoring as well.
Yeah, no shit. Like it's obvious. I feel like
to us,
you can just turn on the tape and you can see that there is a very discernible difference between.
Well, I know that, and I think everybody could see that, Nick. But I think the main thing here that I just think gets lost is that they're also different in this just raw stats and the production and the first downs and the touchdowns and what's going on. Because, like, yes, neither's winning big games, but they're also doing different things when they're on the field as far as production goes. But also, it's going to be tough for Herbert his whole career because he's got Mahomes, Allen, and Stroud in his conference, and it's not a good excuse, but it also is like beating those. It's a reality. Like same thing goes for Josh Allen, who's in my opinion was the best quarterback in football last year individually of his surroundings. Because I thought his situation was so bad, and he did so many. And just watching him play, he made the most. I made this play for you plays of any quarterback I saw, but he still can't get over the hump of Mahomes. Nobody can at this point. And so it is what it is on that front. And we don't have to talk too much quarterbacks, but high end comparison, I wouldn't say Justin Herbert. I don't know. I don't have a high end.
So you think it's higher than Justin Herbert?
I think it's higher than Justin Herbert because of athleticism. Yes.
I don't think that's terrible either. Because we're talking about ceiling. So we're talking about what is his height, right?
Yeah. But it's not Josh Allen for me.
Well, I think Josh Allen just has a much bigger arm.
Exactly. He's a
Yeah.
much bigger arm. And that's so it's just not that. And he's also just a better athlete than May. May's a great athlete. He's not quite Josh Allen.
Josh Allen deceptively is one of the best athletes at the quarterback position.
He has to be. He's 6'5", 240 and runs like a 200-pound person.
I know.
It's
It's crazy,
like,
man.
It's
Yeah.
insane. So
That's
it's
so
it's
much
not
fun.
quite there. So I don't know if I have the eye on comp. Now let's talk now how it fits the Giants. Okay. We always ask this question to start. Drake Maye's on the board at 6 and the Giants pick him. How would you feel?
I would feel very happy. Yes. With the understanding that there's some bust factor. Like the grade I gave him in my evaluation was a 6.5B, meaning the B is bust. Like there is a possibility this guy could bust, but the ceiling is so high that you take that risk. That's why I actually gave comps for him. I don't do comps, but I think the bust would be the Sam Darnold situation, which is also the floor. So anything, even if it doesn't reach maybe the midline of what he could be, he'd still be far better than what Sam Darnold is.
Correct. Okay. I would say to that, if the Giants selected him at 6 and they didn't have to trade any assets to get him, and that's going to be a weird scenario that seems unlikely, but you never know. Justin Herbert fell to 6, remember? If that happens, I would be ecstatic. It would be the best thing that I've felt has happened to the Giants on draft day in my entire lifetime since Eli Manning. Personally, that's how I'd feel.
Not 2018?
Yeah, not 2018. But that's personally how I'd feel. And it's not to say I don't think there's a bust factor with Drake Maye. I think there's a clear bust factor with Drake Maye. But guess what? I think there's a bust factor with all of these quarterbacks, including Caleb Williams, who's unlikely to bust, but has a chance to bust. Because that's the reality of the NFL. 50% of first overall picks at the quarterback position bust. We have to just look at this in such a different perspective than I think people realize. Like, oh, this guy's a bust. This guy might be a bust, but this guy has a high floor. No, none of them have floors. There's all bust factor with all of them. And you can't just expect to hit on these guys. With that in mind, Nick, and that, me prefacing it like that, how would you feel about trading assets to trade up for Drake Maye?
I'm okay with trading up to 3. And I'm not a big trade up guy, you know that, but I want to bet on a talented quarterback who I think has the potential to be a top 5 quarterback. Doesn't mean he will be, but he certainly has that potential because he has the arm talent and for all the reasons that Dan and I have brought up throughout this podcast. So I would be okay with that. You need to go up and get your guy. If you identified this as your guy, go up and get him. And there is an Eli Manning link here too, because Drake Maye has said that he's been in contact with Eli Manning. And I think if there's one person outside of the Giants organization, that has some sway, it would be Eli Manning.
Eli Manning like works for the Giants now too. I feel like he has like his own show and stuff, and I see all those behind the scenes stuff. So I don't even know if he's considered to be outside the Giants organization at this point, but it's close. For me, I would be very happy if they traded up. I wouldn't be as ecstatic because I want those assets and those picks, but I'd be very happy. And my main reason is I just don't think the Giants are going to have an opportunity for a quarterback with this kind of upside as a prospect in a very long time. He is
agreed.
A, fits the age profile. He's still 21 years old. B, fits the frame profile, 6'4.5", 230. C, fits the athleticism profile. Can run, will run, is a good runner. 4, fits the arm talent profile. Great arm talent. 5 fits the anticipatory throwing potential profiles. That's all 5 of what I'm looking for. And I'm just not so sure when the Giants are going to have an opportunity to get that again. And sure, there's a bust factor. There's a lot of negatives to him. But also, I'm looking for the upside. I'm looking for the ceiling as a evaluator. And when am I going to find a prospect that fits all 5 of those buckets again for the Giants? I don't know. Hopefully soon if it doesn't happen this year, but I'd rather just take it now and take the chance on it now. And then 6, the one I need to mention, which is he gets to work with Brian Daboll, the perfect guy to fix his flaws and maximize his skill set. We've already seen him maximize a quarterback like him. He's not the same, but we've seen him maximize Josh Allen, who's a quarterback like him. So that's pretty much where I'm at with that.
And look, dude, if it is Caleb Williams, which is going to be, and then Jaden Daniels, which is still up in the air, but Adam Schefter went on the Trap and Dive podcast. We had Jamal on the podcast before.
Sure.
So great job by him to get Adam Schefter on. And Schefter said, start planning. It's a Washington Commanders podcast. Start planning on getting Jaden Daniel jerseys is what Schefter said. So that's what it's looking like.
Nice.
So if that happens, it gets very interesting if the Patriots aren't fully in the Drake Maye camp or the JJ McCarthy camp.
Sure.
And if they do want to trade down, or if they love another quarterback, and they could trade down to 6 and possibly get that quarterback, if it is Bo Nix or Michael Penix Jr., whatever it is. But trading down to 6 or trading down to 11, like we've said on a previous podcast, with the Vikings, you get 23, but they might also love Marvin Harrison Jr. or Rome Odunze or somebody that they believe is going to be available if they know what Chargers and the Cardinals are going to do. So I think the Patriots could be a realistic option if Jaden Daniels is off the board, if it's true that the Patriots are really enamored with Jaden Daniels. Again, we live in smokescreen land right now, man. Snoop Dogg is to your left. Willie Nelson is to your right. No one exactly knows what's going on, but it's a possibility.
It's definitely a possibility. And, on that front, it's interesting because if I'm rooting for this, and I'll be honest with you, Nick, I don't think it's any much surprise anyone's followed my coverage or listened to me on this podcast. I'm rooting for the Giants to get Drake Maye in this draft. That to me is the best chance the Giants have to becoming one of the best teams in the NFL fast, is finding a quarterback like Drake Maye, developing him, and hopefully he reaches his high-end traits and becomes, one of the guys we mentioned earlier. We talked all 5 best quarterbacks in the NFL. They all have elite arm talent. And to be honest, most of them have elite frame too. Very few of those guys we mentioned didn't have a great frame too. So it's just things you kind of need. But to me, what I'm hoping for, because this is my hope, Nick, is that the Patriots fall in love with J.J. McCarthy and take him at 3, because I just think it's a better scenario for the Giants if it goes those 3 quarterbacks first, Caleb, Jaden, J.J. McCarthy, and now Drake Maye still on the board at 4 with the Cardinals, because I think there's a chance, not positive, there's a chance the Cardinals are just like, we can't take a chance, we need Marvin Harrison, so they just draft him. Now we're on to pick 5, and if the Giants want to move from pick 6 to pick 5 to get Drake Maye, which they would do, I think it's clear based on what Joe Shane did last year just to get Deontay Banks, that if it gets to that point, they will do that. Now you're giving up a lot less. Like if you're going from 6 to 5, they may only have to give up pick 47 or next year's 2 and like a 3 next year or something like that. And now you're keeping this year's 2, or you keep next year's 2, one or the other. So I still think the best case scenario is the Patriots fall in love with JJ McCarthy and draft him at 3.
That's provided the Chargers want like Joe Alt. They really want Malik Neighbors or a Roma Dunze, because
otherwise another team, Minnesota, you're saying,
or whoever else is in the camp. There could be a secret team that's really being quiet about it.
It could be, but those teams just don't have the ammo, in my opinion. Minnesota's the only one to worry about. Like the Raiders and Broncos have a need at quarterback and could love Drake Maye too. But what are they giving? They're mid first round pick now, next year's 1, which I don't even think the Broncos even have next year's 1 after all that Russell Wilson trade. They might at this point, but like the Sean Payton, I think they gave up another 1 for Sean Payton, right? Like or something like that. Was it a 1 or a 2? Might have been last year's 1. But like the Raiders and the Broncos, do they really have the ammo to match? The only team that can really compete with the Giants, in my opinion, for a trade up is the Vikings, because they picked up 23. But then even then, it's like you get out of a top 10, and are you definitely getting that receiver you wanted? I don't know. You're probably not getting one of the big 3 at that point. No. So like, are the Patriots or the Chargers? Chargers might be willing to do it. That's my scare, because they may not view Joe Alt as highly as we think they do. They may have a different tackle they love, and they may be like, look, if we move to 11, we could still get one of these great tackles. There's so many great tackles on the board. So that's the one that scares me a little bit more. The Chargers just not needing a receiver. But also this goes back to the Giants should have the 5th overall pick. I'm still pissed about that. They shouldn't even have 6, but that's crying over spilt milk. But yeah, so it's an interesting, the scenarios are all interesting, Nick, but I think for me, this is the one quarterback that's possibly available to the Giants, since Caleb is unavailable, that I'd be down to not only draft at 6 and I'd be ecstatic about, but trade up for. And I really would love it, man. I'd love to have this type of talent with the Giants. Maybe it doesn't work, but if it does, man, we're talking about it. We have the chance to be like one of the teams to worry about over the next decade if it works out.
Brings us back to our high school days. That's the last time it was like that. That's insane to think about. That's just how bad this franchise has been. I think the best case scenario for me on draft night would be Giants are sitting there at 6 and Drake Maye falls to them, which seems very unlikely, but it's plausible. That's a plausible reality.
It's plausible. What if it goes McCarthy at 3, Arizona says, I can't take a chance losing Marvin Harrison, and then Harbaugh says, I can't take a chance losing Joe Alt. Like that's possible, right? That they just
is possible.
I don't want to trade down. I don't want to miss these guys.
Yeah. And dude, that would be amazing. That would be a great situation scenario.
To keep 47 and all of next year's capital and get Drake Maye out of this class, it would just be such a home run for the Giants.
After the Tommy Cutlets 3-game winning streak.
Yes.
And now you're paying him a little bit less because he wasn't the 2nd overall pick. He was the 5th.
Yeah. Save some cap space in the mix. Yeah. We're trimming cap space too, baby. We got it all. Yeah, we'll see if that happens. I don't think that's going to happen. I think I'm like, I said 35-40%. I'm like at 40 to 50% chance. I think the Giants are going to trade up for Drake Maye at this point.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't think they're going to get lucky enough to get him at 6, but 40, I think there's a good chance they're going to trade up for this kid. And we'll see if that premonition dream I had ends up being something we can look to in the future. If I get any other of those,
you're going to go 6 to midnight on draft night if this happens.
All right. Thanks again for listening to Big Blue Banter podcast. This was a profile on Drake Maye. You've seen a lot of content lately. We just posted an interview with Sean McAvoy either a few days ago or yesterday, depending on when you listen to this. I don't know when this is coming out, but a lot more good content coming. Just to preview a little, some of this might be dated since I don't know when we're dropping everything, but We have an interview with David Syverson of Our Lads coming up. We do this every year. You guys love it. We love it. We're excited for it. And we have a few other interviews in the mix as well that I haven't confirmed fully yet, but I'm working on out behind the scenes, and I think we're going to get. So just keep an eye out. We could have a lot of good guests coming down the line. And if not, more good draft content. We're going to do some top fives, maybe by position. I think I want to do with you, Nick, a top 5 quarterback podcast, not as it fits the Giants, but just to hear your thoughts one more time on the quarterbacks and where you, and I want you to, what we're going to do is tier them, which I think is really important. Then we'll do it for receivers, some of the other big positions the Giants are looking at. And then we're going to do some sleepers, breakouts, sleepers and breakouts in this class, and then some my guys too. We always have to finish with the my guys. Also, you know what we haven't done, which got to do? Got to do a 7-round mock, the dueling 7-round mock. People love that.
Shit.
That's coming up.
Sorry.
Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, we're definitely going to get that, and that's fun. That's coming up. So we're going to get all of that in and probably more. I know some of you didn't get your questions answered on the mailbag shows. We'll do that at some point too. We'll get to the final questions there too. So thank you so much for tuning in. Please like and subscribe, help support the show. Otherwise, have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.